Welcome to meeting number 33 of the House Common Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The committee is meeting today from 3:36 to 5:36. We will hear from witnesses as part of the committee's study of government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and go in camera to discuss committee business and consider our report on the NUCTEC security equipment contract. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation of the video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. To raise a point of order during the meeting, committee members should ensure their microphone is unmuted and say point of order to get the chair's attention. The clerk and the analysts are participating in the meeting virtually today. If you need to speak with them during the meeting, please email them through the committee email address, or the clerk can also be reached on his mobile phone. For those people who are participating in the committee room, please note that masks are required unless seated or when physical distancing is not possible. I will now invite the witnesses to make their opening statements. We will start with Mr. Scott with the Communications Security Establishment.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Scott Jones, and I am the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity at the Communications Security Establishment, or CSE. CSE, reporting to the Minister of National Defence, is one of Canada's key security and intelligence agencies, with a mandate to provide foreign intelligence against a broad range of government priorities. CSE is also the country's lead technical authority for cybersecurity. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is a branch within CSE. In our national role, we defend the Government of Canada, share best practices to prevent compromises, manage and coordinate incidents of importance, and work to secure a digital Canada. I appeared before your committee last May at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I would like to provide an update on how the cyber threat environment has evolved and the work we have done since then to protect from all types of cyber threats the Government of Canada, the healthcare sector, and Canada's broader critical infrastructure and Canadians. The COVID-19 pandemic has created an uncertain environment that is vulnerable to exploitation. CSE continues to leverage all aspects of its mandate to help ensure that Canada is protected against cyber threats and to inform the Government of Canada decisions. CSE and the Cyber Centre are continuing to work in coordination with industry partners so that malicious cyber actors and fraudulent sites are less able to take advantage of those Canadians. Since March 2020, the Cyber Centre's work has contributed to the removal of over 8,000 fraudulent sites or email addresses, including websites impersonating the Government of Canada or impersonating COVID-19 booking portals. While this important work has been primarily focused on COVID-19 related fraud, this work continues every day as we identify and remove more fraudulent domains impersonating the Government of Canada or organizations involved in our COVID-19 support efforts. The Cyber Centre has assessed that the COVID-19 pandemic presents an elevated level of risk to the cybersecurity of Canadian health organizations involved in the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, CSE and the Cyber Centre have continued to raise public awareness of cyber threats to Canadian health organizations by proactively issuing cyber threat alerts and providing tailored advice and guidance to all provincial, territorial, and regional health authorities, federally funded associations and centres of excellence, patient care facilities, biopharmaceutical companies and research entities, medical device manufacturers, and academic research institutions. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the Cyber Centre has hosted over 40 health sector community calls that provide timely updates to the health sector on the evolving cyber threat landscape. Each one of those is tailored to the health sector. We have grown the health community, which we support from a handful of organizations pre-pandemic to over 150 key health sector entities and work with the IT security leads from these entities on a regular basis. The Cyber Centre, in close collaboration with our colleagues at Public Safety Canada, have facilitated cybersecurity posture assessments for many of these entities in the health sector, assisting them with determining their cybersecurity gaps and working with them to improve their cyber posture and cyber resilience. The Cyber Centre has been focused on supporting COVID-19 vaccine research and development entities across Canada. We are working with a number of specific vaccine support organizations to offer services such as protected DNS that will strengthen their cyber defense capabilities and dramatically reduce their vulnerabilities to cyber attacks. To protect and defend the vaccine rollout efforts, the Cyber Centre continues to work with the Federal Task Force, the vaccine supply chain, and the regional health authorities across Canada to raise awareness on cybersecurity, enforce and increase readiness for incident response, and inform organizations when looming threats arise. We continue to reinforce perimeter security and access control to safeguard the vaccine ordering, tracking, and data repository that is currently being developed by the federal health authorities. To protect critical infrastructure, CSE and the Cyber Centre continue to regularly monitor and proactively share threat information with Canadian organizations, government partners, and industry stakeholders. Finally, this pandemic has made all of us more reliant on digital infrastructure. It is critical now more than ever that Canadians have access to the right information on how they can protect themselves online. The Cyber Centre has created a collection of advice and guidance products available to inform Canadians about how to stay safe online. And I encourage Canadians who are looking for easy to follow tips on cybersecurity to visit our website, getcybersafe.ca. For businesses and larger organizations, or if you would like to read more of the publications of the Cyber Centre, they can be found at cyber.gc.ca. CSE is constantly working to help address foreign and cyber threats facing Canada in the health sector. And we will continue to do so during this current pandemic and well after it's over. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And now we'll hear from Shared Services Canada.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm Sonny Perron, the Executive Vice President for Shared Service Canada. I'm accompanied today by Mr. Matt Davis, Deputy Chief Technology Officer for SSC. Comme vous le savez, la ministre Murray a notamment...
As you are aware, Minister Murray's mandate includes leading transformation of the Government of Canada into a more digital government in order to improve citizen service. To effectively modernize how we deliver digital services to Canadians, we are investing resources to develop a fast and reliable network that is secure.
Service online, the risk to Canadian and the Government of Canada information is increasing. Robust enterprise cybersecurity services are essential to our plan, and we must accelerate investment in order to keep ahead of our threat actors. As you can imagine, network security is more important than ever as Canadians access more programs and services online, such as the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, as more public servants are working remotely. Avant la pandémie, environ 20...
Prior to the pandemic, approximately 20,000 public servants accessed the network remotely on a typical day. To enable public servants to work from home, SSC was able to rapidly increase secure remote access capacity. It can now support 290,000 simultaneous connections. This allowed public servants to continue to serve Canadians during a critical time. SSC also acquired a suite of collaboration tools so that federal public servants were able to continue working. Today, almost all federal employees are using Teams, which offer a protected B level of security.
Working online are just astronomical from our perspective. This transition to a distributed workplace has been done without compromising on IT security. We were very aware that as the use of digital tools and telework increase, so does the risk of being the target of malicious cyber activity. SPC met sans cesse à jour.
SSC is continually updating its security infrastructure and software to leverage the latest security measures. We are committed to protecting the Government of Canada's data, information, and information technology infrastructure, along with the data and privacy of our citizens, so Canadians can rely on a secure, stable, and resilient digital government.
Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity and Treasury Board Secretariat Office of the Chief Information Officer. They are essential partners for SSC for the conception and deployment of a responsive IT solutions. In addition, each and every day, we intercept 2 billion malicious activity. These are not theoretical cyber threats. They are real and they are organized. Again, in such context, the collaboration and coordination with our partner is critical. Les vulnérabilités de SolarWinds.
Recently exploited vulnerabilities to SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange have highlighted the need to be able to respond to cyber incidents quickly and pivot to new technologies. We recently published the Network Modernization Way Forward strategy paper, which solicited feedback from our various industry partners and stakeholders on our future state.
Outlines a number of Shared Service Canada priorities, including moving towards software-defined infrastructure, leveraging improved wireless technology, and adopting a zero-trust architecture. We are investing in our cyber defense capability and migrating towards zero trust. Le terme zéro confiance signifie que nous ne
Zero trust means that we never trust and always verify everything before granting access through a process of continuous monitoring. This involves verifying users, validating devices, and ensuring that individuals have access to the resources needed to their job. SSC has increased the overall information technology security of the Government of Canada through services such as multiple layer defense, vulnerability management, and supply chain integrity. Our integrated cyber and information technology security program protects the infrastructure supporting other departments and agencies.
This committee, Mr. Chair, that we are constantly monitoring for cyber threat and have robust system and tools in place to detect, investigate, and take active measure to neutralize them. Under normal operating circumstances, no organization is immune to IT security threat, but these are extraordinary times. Cybersecurity is and will continue to be a priority for SSC to safeguard the government and Canadians from cyber threat. Merci, nous serons heureux de prendre vos questions.
Thank you. We would be happy to take your questions.
Merci, Monsieur Perron. We'll now go to the Treasury Board Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be with the committee again. I'm pleased to be joined today by Aaron Snow, the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Digital Service, along with my colleagues from the Communications Security Establishment and Shared Services Canada. After my opening statement, my colleagues and I will be available to answer the committee's questions. Mr. Chair, it may be helpful to briefly explain the roles and responsibilities of the Office of the Chief Information Officer as it pertains to cybersecurity in the Government of Canada. The office provides strategic direction and leadership in information management, information technology, security, privacy, and access to information across the Government of Canada. We also provide support and guidance on capacity building, project management, and oversight across the government. Treasury Board policy instruments outline the roles and responsibilities for GC cybersecurity management and departmental management. Leveraging the policy on government security and the policy on service and digital, we provide strategic direction and oversight. We define cybersecurity requirements to ensure the Government of Canada and departmental information and data applications, systems, and networks are secure, reliable, and trusted. During cybersecurity events, TBS will perform strategic coordination, which may include the issuance of strategic direction to departments and agencies on measures to minimize the GC-wide impact. This is critical work, which is why our office works very closely with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity and Shared Services Canada to collectively form the Government of Canada IT Security Tripartite, established to develop and maintain a coordinated and collaborative approach to enterprise security. This includes maintaining awareness of the global cyber threat environment, regularly scanning for new vulnerabilities that may impact government systems, and ensuring there is a coordinated response to potential and active threats through the Government of Canada's Cybersecurity Event Management Plan. And this work has only intensified over the past 14 months, Mr. Chair. Throughout the pandemic, we have been working very closely with SSC to support government operations by ensuring that secure IT infrastructure and systems continue to enable the delivery of critical federal services. Virtual collaboration was a key element in ensuring the continuity of operations. To enable this, the Government of Canada has had to adjust rapidly, enabling over 290,000 employees and contractors to work securely and remotely, representing a significant increase to remote connections from pre-pandemic levels. From the early days of the pandemic, TBS, SSC, and CSC worked very closely together to address the quickly evolving needs of the GC. Shared Services Canada procured and provisioned new devices and equipment and rapidly deployed new secure cloud-based collaboration and communication systems, while the Office of the Chief Information Officer provided resources, advice, and guidance to Government of Canada departments, employees, and contractors on working remotely securely. During this time, CSC provided ongoing advice on the evolving cyber threat conditions related to the pandemic. This was to ensure that public servants could continue serving Canadians, all while ensuring that the security, privacy, and integrity of government information was not compromised. Another example of collaboration is the work of the Canadian Digital Service, or CDS, a team within the Treasury Board Secretariat that collaborates with departments to address service delivery challenges. CDS has developed GC Notify, a platform tool that allows departments to quickly and easily push email and text messages to subscribers. When the pandemic started, misinformation was prevalent. CDS, Service Canada, and Health Canada came together to use GC Notify to build Get Updates on COVID-19, an email service to get people quick and trusted info about COVID-19. Since its launch, the service has securely sent over 5.5 million notifications to subscribers. Indeed, Mr. Chair, security has been the priority throughout the pandemic. With so many public servants working from home, we have taken concrete steps to ensure the ongoing security and safety of government networks. We have robust systems in place to monitor, detect, and investigate potential cybersecurity threats to information, including new and emerging threats that resulted from working remotely. Safeguards such as enhanced and enterprise secure remote access, digital signature workflows, as well as appropriate policy guidance have been used to protect information while ensuring employees can continue delivering trusted services and programs to Canadians. It has also been working to protect the Government of Canada by defending important programs against cyber threats, including COVID-related benefits such as the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. The Centre is constantly monitoring the security of cloud usage across the Government of Canada and evaluating cloud applications, including the Public Health Agency of Canada. Mr. Chair, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to transform the operational and service landscape of government departments. It has forced us to accelerate digital transformation efforts that were already underway and to move quickly to deliver new services that directly support Canadians. At each step of the way, security has remained at the forefront. We would remain focused on continuously enhancing cybersecurity in Canada by preparing for all types of cyber incidents and protecting Canadians and their data. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're ready to take the committee's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bouillard. We will now start the first round of questions, and we'll start with 6 minutes with Mr. Paul Hoos.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. My first question is for Mr. Jones. I'd like to talk about Huawei. The first time I asked you a question, that was at the Public Safety Committee in September 2018, and I asked you at that time what was the position of Canada in terms of Huawei and 5G. So that was pretty much 3 years ago. We didn't have as much information, but we know that our Five Eyes partner have now decided something very clear. So here's my question. Have you tabled your technical report to the government?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's as this matters before ministers, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment any further. But it is something that we continuously work on in terms of cybersecurity, working with our partners.
Mr. Jones, I'm asking you, as head of CST, if you've tabled the report. I'm not telling you what's in the report, what are the results of the report, but have you tabled the report?
Mr. Chair, as I said, we continue to work with our partners across the government, and that our information has been shared with our partners, but we are waiting for the Department of Public Safety as the lead on the overall study and report.
Okay.
Another question about the same company. I'd like to know if your department was consulted for the development of Huawei with a company that is called ICE Wireless. That's a company that makes some developments in the north. Were you consulted about that?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think I would have to look into anything, but we do have under our current existing security review program, we have relationships with the majority of the telecommunications providers around Canada, and we do talk to them about their overall deployments and their plans, but it is related to the 4G LTE environment right now, and any specifics on our dealings with specific companies are something that I'd have to look into.
Perfect.
Great. Another question. 60 experts, including the National Unit on Coordination for Cybercrime of the RCMP, made a detailed report. And they've asked governments from across the world to take measures. Will the government accept all of the recommendations in this report?
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair, for the question. In terms of the government accepting the report, I think the report, Mr. Paulus, if I understand correctly, you are referring to it's the cybercrime ransomware report, sir?
Wait.
Correct.
It would be unacceptable, I think, for an unelected public servant to speak on behalf of the government and the elected government. But certainly, we do look for any activity we can take to bolster our defenses against ransomware, something that we're taking very seriously.
Merci,
as
thank
part
you.
of the Cyber Center.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Perron, a report was published, an internal report was published, and it is not confidential. It's within the Department of Defense. And it talks about their assessment for the management of information for the Defense Department. That report was tabled last year, and it's quite critical towards the shared services for the management of computer systems. So the military is saying that they're not well understood and that they're not getting any service. Sometimes it took up to 6 months for shared services to answer requests from the Department of Defense. What do you have to say about that? Thank you for this question, Mr. Chair. So I read the report that was published by the Audit Committee of the National Defense. That's a report that talks about actions that were taken in the last few years. But since we've established a new structure within SSC so that we have a better interface with our departments that are our clients, we now have a team that works only with the RCMP, National Defense, and Veterans Affairs. So we have a new team, and we try to establish plans that are more integrated. There were a lot of questions in the report about the deployment of phone services in military bases. That was a big issue, but we've solved that issue. We have a joint plan with the National Defense. So things are improving, but have you improved the services over the weekends? Because one of the issues was that no one was there to answer a call on Saturdays or Sundays. Now, are there people on call on the weekends? Because we know that the military works 24/7. Do you now have staff that can answer those calls?
On that question, I can't give you a specific answer. Every application that operates on the Government of Canada network has standards in terms of the critical aspect and response time, depending on the services provided. National Defense, there's a different scale. Sometimes we have to review them, but I can't respond to your question other than that. Yes, we would like a follow-up on that.
Mr. Paul Hoos, for your questions and for the responses. And just as I've indicated in the past, if responders do feel that there's more that, or for example, that they indicated they would look into something or provide a response, if they would provide that to the clerk, it would be appreciated, and the clerk will distribute it to the members. Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Johari for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, thank you to all the witnesses and for the service that you and your departments are providing over many years, and especially over the last year and a half, to make sure that various part of Government of Canada and those who work with them are kept safe. Let me start with Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, in your testimony or your opening remarks, you talked about that the Cyber Center has been focused on supporting COVID-19 vaccine research and development entities across Canada. Can you specifically talk about the measures that you've taken and the type of threats that you potentially identified?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and absolutely, I'd love to talk about that. There's a few aspects. First of all, we have been working with multiple entities across the sector on providing basic advice and guidance in cybersecurity, but also specific threat information. Early in the pandemic, along with our allies, we did note that there was malicious state-sponsored activity targeting vaccine researchers. We went public with a public attribution on that, but we followed that up with private advice on what could be done to protect against those. What did the threat look like? What steps organizations could take? Further, though, we continue to work with those organizations to ensure that they're strengthening their cybersecurity by providing advice and guidance, things that they can do to secure themselves. And that includes us sharing everything we learn from our defense of the Government of Canada so that they're well prepared for any threats. And certainly using our foreign intelligence mandate, learning what any threat actor is looking for. We also make sure that the sector is aware of those threats as well, so that they can take action before things happen.
Thank you. You also said that a number of specific vaccine support organization you work with, and you talked about the protected DNS. Can you expand on what protected DNS is, and what is it specifically your organization has done?
Absolutely. I think this is one of those areas where on previous meetings, I've talked about a service called Canadian Shield, which is a service that we worked with the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. So what that does is it means, let's say you get an email with a piece of malware and it says, click on this, and it's cybercrime. Mm-hmm. What it does is you click it, you can't go there. It stops it. And so that's how it's protected. It protects you from from making that mistake where you can click. We partnered with CIRA to provide the same service for commercial entities, in this case, vaccine support organizations. And we did that because of the threat that they're facing during the pandemic. And we worked to provide that same service. And so that includes everything we learned from the Government of Canada, everything that we block, those up to 7 billion actions per day we take to defend the Government of Canada. We make sure that all of that is also shared with CIRA, our partner in this, so that all those organizations benefit from the same defense as well.
Thank you. I also understand our government recently updated the Digital Operations Strategic Plan. I would like to get some input from all the three witnesses in what their thought about this is, and if any of you could start by explaining what DOSP is and how each one of your department is contributing to that. Probably we could start with Mr. Jones.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, my office is the one who publishes what we call the DOSP.
Okay,
so if that's okay, I can start, and then the other members, I'm sure, will have more to add.
That's what I thought I should start with.
Thank you. So the DOSP is a document that is provided every year, or is updated every year, and provides a 3-year integrated management plan for service, information, data, and cybersecurity. The current DOSP has been updated and refreshed to reflect the accelerated digital transformation. It's made up of 4 areas, or what we call the 4 pillars. First is modernizing the way we replace, build, and manage major IT systems, addressing the legacy, what we call the technical debt within our organizations. Second is to providing services to people when and where they need them, ensuring that we provide user-centric services to Canadians. The third is taking a whole of government approach to digital operations, providing an enterprise view so that we don't duplicate some of our efforts. And lastly is about transforming how we work, understanding that new ways of working, of providing governance, of providing resources is critical to being able to answer the challenge. So maybe I would leave it there and allow the others to respond if they wish.
Mr. Chair, from a Shared Service Canada perspective, I would say that this plan is very critical in a sense that it provides the architecture and the direction for all the client department to advance the agenda, from dealing with legacy architecture and us supporting them, modernizing their infrastructure and us supporting them, and transforming the enterprise and us supporting them. So all the signals that are in this plan are essential for SSC to achieve its mandate. It does influence the client department that comes to us for support in advancing their own IT agenda to provide them a broader framework. So we are prepared to support that. So it goes into supporting workload migration. It supports advancing connectivity to the cloud and providing access to the cloud in a secure manner. It supports and directs department to participate actively in enterprise solutions, so we avoid duplication of technology and rather use enterprise approach that serve all departments. So it's an essential pillar of our work agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm out of time.
If you would just quickly, seeing as the other two did, if you would just quickly give us a quick response, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I would just say that I think the Digital Operations Strategic Plan lets us ensure that security is built in from the start and forefront and thought of at the beginning. And also setting priorities. The fact is we have limited limited security experts. And so it makes sure that we also put those resources on the most important priorities for the entire government of Canada to advance the agenda. So both of those are critical. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will begin with Mr. Jones. Services to Canadians, were they interrupted because of malicious events or cyber attacks?
There's a continuing range of cyber activity that we face every day. As I mentioned in my a few minutes ago, we take over up to between 2 and 8 billion actions per day, on average around 7 billion, because of cyber activity targeting the government. But to my knowledge,
Do you interrupt them? Have you been able to, or did this disrupt or interrupt services to Canada? I know there's 7 billion, but have some of these interrupted services to Canadians?
no, and I would probably turn to my colleague, Mr. Brouillard, to ask if, from the Treasury Board perspective, but from my perspective, we've managed, we have not seen any disruption because of cyber attack to the government of Canada. There have been cyber incidents where we have chosen to take things, to take action, but nothing that the cyber attack itself disrupted.
Okay, merci.
Thank you very much. We all know that tens or hundreds of thousands of people had their personal data stolen, ended up with pay slips for income that had nothing to do with them. What are the causes, impacts, and what solutions are implemented? I can respond to this question. One of the cases you're referring to is with the agency. Can you hear me? I can hear you as if you were very far away. I can hear you better now. I think you're referring to what we call the credential stuffing last summer, where the identities of Canadians were stolen by other sources. And we don't have any precise sources, but we know that there were other events in the Canadian economy. That data ends up on the dark web, and which is the criminal side of the internet. So criminals take that information and test them on federal systems. And when we see systems where there are several attacks on identities, we chose in that case to shut down the service as a preventive measure to make sure that there weren't any further attacks. And the agency also verified transactions, everything that was suspicious, they contacted users. And thank you for the question. For the software most frequently targeted by cyber attacks, so those that have a high usage, the Office suite and everything, Microsoft, for the use of softwares, Microsoft, isn't that a threat at the Government of Canada for cyber attacks? Because that software is very targeted. I'll invite my colleague, Mr. Jones, to respond.
I think there's a few things to consider. Yes, it is the most used software, so of course anybody looks to the most frequently used software in terms of malicious actors. However, it's also the software where the most security researchers are already been working on as well. So I think one of the important aspects I would point to is the Government of Canada's response to things like patching, updating that software, keeping it up to date and managing it properly. And that's one of the aspects of the benefits of Shared Services Canada, where we've seen a significant improvement when SSC is the lead for a department to respond very quickly to our alerts. And in some of the larger cases, within minutes of our alerts, SSC was beginning the patching process to make sure that we were ready to go. And I think that's something. It's really about every software has vulnerabilities, It's how quickly can you respond to mitigate and reduce the risk that we face as an organization. No piece of software is invulnerable, unfortunately.
Okay.
In the United States, in the past month, there were several attacks on their systems with the SolarWinds program, and they got through to Homeland Security and the Treasury Board. Did we see that type of attack in Canada, and how did and what was attacked, and how what response was taken?
Alors, je peux dire que
I can say that the Canadian government's network. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Mr. Boyard. Can you hear me now? I can hear you now. There might be a lag, and the network, the Canadian government's network, did see cases like SolarWinds, but because of our infrastructure, shared services, and CSC, we had the capacity to see what happened, and there were no attacks on our infrastructure. We identified vulnerabilities and addressed those. And as far as I'm concerned, my colleague Mr. Jones could confirm, but there weren't any cases where we saw what happened in the United States. Thank you very much. Very quickly.
Mademoiselle, I appreciate that. And we'll now go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and I'm happy to pick up from that line of questioning. And just to be clear, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Jones, when referencing, as my friend from the block just did, about the, I believe it was the CRA breaches of close to almost 50,000 incidences of suspicious activity. I'm wondering, would that be something that the communication security establishment would flag and pick up, or would that be left to the agency's forensic analysis?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that really is that's a great question. One of the areas where, in terms of credential stuffing or the information theft, the amount of information that's already been stolen about so many of us from different data breaches, is reused against the government, is the threat. But typically what you're talking about there is how does the application being abused in terms of to attempt to commit fraud. And so that would be where it would be for the department to look for. They know what normal activity looks like. So the department look for things that look abnormal. But we would obviously work with them. We worked closely with CRA throughout this, but also any department that runs these types of services. But that would be something that it looks from a cybersecurity perspective from the outside, it looks like a normal user. I have your username and I have your password. So it looks very legitimate. But that's where we make sure that there's no light between departments. So we look outside and the departments look inside for fraudulent activity.
So in follow-up to that, and of course, we've heard lots of discussion around the prevalence of CERB fraud, and yet we hear Mr. Brouillard talk about the 50,000 identities stored in the dark web. Has there been any early indications or cross-reference between information that was taken through these breaches and potential fraudulent applications for the CERB?
So, Mr. Chair, I think I'll turn to my colleague.
Before that happens, Mr. Chair, can I just ask Mr. Jones, would something like that be in his purview before it's passed along?
So we're really talking about two different things, Mr. Chair. I think there's the amount of data breaches that have happened. So the Privacy Commissioner of Canada in our National Cyber Threat Assessment, we highlight this, said that 28 million Canadians last year had their information taken. That the information has then been reused to target those, they reuse that information to target the government of Canada. So by reusing passwords, for example, somebody was able to log in. And so we're not talking about information that was taken from the government. It was taken from other data breaches, but people reuse things. Our security questions are the same. What's your favorite color? What school did you go to, et cetera? That's the information these criminals have stolen. And because passwords are horrible and we all have too many of them, we tend to reuse them. And so a lot of Canadians reused them, and so those were able to be replayed. That's what credential stuffing is. And so really we're talking about information from other data breaches then turned and used against the government of Canada. But Mark, maybe.
But just I do say this respectfully because it's not often that we have a member from the security establishment before us, which is why I'm trying to get the most out of this intervention because I don't know when you may be back. But is there a scenario, and just this is for my own edification, where the information that might have been obtained through the CRA's vulnerabilities could then have been used to reaccess a fraudulent CERB applications? And maybe I'm oversimplifying it or conflating it. I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Jones.
Well, I think that'd be a pretty unlikely scenario, to be frank. I'm not sure how, because that wasn't what we saw happening here. We saw Canadians being impersonated in this activity, or where they were using their legitimate credentials. So essentially logging in as them. And so, but other than that, I think that's kind of my overall response to this. But Mark,
that's fair. When I hear that the information would be parked on the dark web, I have this like nefarious vision of what that looks like and how it might be used through, organized crime, non-traditional organized crime, and other entities to defraud the government. And I'm just wondering if some of our own vulnerabilities may have played a role in that in some way. And so I'll ask as a follow-up question, Mr. Jones, through you, Mr. Chair, is that I've heard now in many different public accounts committees in different places, the legacy, and it's just how old some of these technologies are. Is this something that is currently being reviewed by the communication security establishment? Would it be in your oversight to review system-wide vulnerabilities and provide information back to departments that would triage and find the biggest gaps in our security?
Well, Mr. Chair, that's a great question, and you've got the right group here. It's the tripartite that would really look to say, how do we make sure that the government is robust? And Mark would lead that as the CIO for the government. But really, yes, the answer is that. In some cases, legacy does work in our favor. Sometimes things are so old that they actually
this is the
don't
floppy
really
disk. We're not going to have any floppy disk espionage. But I think we talked about that.
Sometimes it's so old it just doesn't connect to the internet. But in most cases, though, this is where Shared Services Canada, our perimeter strategy, making sure that we're ringing security and layering different elements of security to afford that level of protection, because we do take it very seriously, the need to protect that information. But as we modernize those systems and implement the digital operations strategic plan, making sure that we're building in security from the start. But the fact is that there have been so many data breaches outside of the government of Canada, I'm talking, that there's a tremendous amount of information available on each citizen about all of us on the web. I know I've been the victim of data breaches. So when Yahoo was breached.
Wow, did they ever pick the wrong guy?
Well, it's the reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Hey, could you imagine though hacking like this?
Mr. Jones, thank you. We'll now go to, we've just finished our first round and we'll now start our second round. And we will start with Mr. Macaulay for 5 minutes.
I kind of like where Mr. Green was going with that. Appreciate the witnesses being here today. The revised National Security and Intelligence Committee annual report showed up at our desks a couple days ago. So I just want a couple questions about that. It talks about China and Russia, the main malicious actors that we've got to be aware of. Is this for industrial espionage? Is this attacks on the government? Is this attacks on our logistics systems, or issues like utilities and that? Would you be able to let us know on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I'd actually refer back to our National Cyber Threat Assessment, which we issued in November 2020, and we listed 4 states as the primary threats to Canada: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And we did mention that certainly intellectual property theft is one aspect of this, but also critical infrastructure was an interest. Now, I would really like to emphasize, though, we did say that absent international hostilities, We think it is extremely unlikely that any nation state would deliberately disrupt critical infrastructure. I just really want to emphasize that point because the
Well,
headline tends to be the
what
first
do you
half.
term as critical infrastructure? And your comment about absence of, active war, we just saw Colonial taken down, I think, a couple weeks ago. Is that not a similar concern for us?
That's absolutely it is. In fact, it's something that I said with the National Post, and it's one of the concerns we have is that ransomware, when it's deployed against a victim like a critical infrastructure provider, because of the way technology is merging together, it means that to defend themselves, they take all of their technology offline. They isolate and they shut down to take protective measures. And publicly, what we've seen, Colonial did that. They took their pipeline operations offline so that they could get control back of their infrastructure. That is something we highlighted in the National Cyber Threat Assessment to say we need to be taking this very seriously. And ransomware is the number one threat facing Canada and Canadians, and that includes critical infrastructure for the exact reason that we saw. We were all hoping that we wouldn't see in the cybersecurity industry something like a Colonial pipeline, but it is the first of many.
Yeah, who would be responsible for following up on such things? I mean, we obviously, it's a wide amount of responsibilities. Of course, there's airports, there's pipeline infrastructure, there's utilities. Who generally is responsible for that so we don't have a Colonial here? Or attack on, an airport or other issues? Is it just different levels of government?
It does depend. Now we work with all levels of government, and we do work with critical infrastructure providers, trying to get we make sure that all the information is provided, it's available, and we do try to build individual relationships with companies. In general, we have a very receptive audience. They all care about this as much as we do, but the IT environment simply is, in general, it's weak for cybersecurity, and so you have to layer on this tremendous amount of defense. So these are our areas where we work together. It's a shared responsibility, not just federal government, but it's the responsibility ultimately of the infrastructure owner and operator. They own their network, they own their infrastructure, they make investment decisions. But we work to make sure that they have all the best information we can give them, and that we work together to try to make sure that we're addressing threats as early as possible. But it's a shared responsibility.
What about Crown corporations? Are they treated exactly like a government department?
No, Mr. Chair, though the Crown corporations have kind of a unique status. We are able to provide the same levels of service that we do for all federal organizations, but because of their structure, their chief executives tend to have more flexibility in terms of what they decide for more like the private sector in terms of what they do for cybersecurity.
Yeah,
but we do work with many of them.
Yeah, a lot of that obviously was decided years ago before we had such issues coming up. Is that something that we need a rethink? Yes, Crown Corps operate at arm's length, but that being said, for something like cybersecurity, should we have a rethink to bring it under CSC?
Well, as I said, we are able to provide the full range of services that we do for the federal government. That is by far our biggest client, but it is optional for Crown corporations, and they make the choice. But we have made the offer to every one of them to work with them, just as we do with every government department as well.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. And now we'll go to Mr. Kazmierczak for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Each year the Chief Information Officer hands out community awards, and in 2020, Shared Services Canada was awarded the Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion Award for the Accessibility, Accommodations, and Adaptive Computer Technology Program, or ACT. I was delighted to see that that an additional $3 million was allocated in budget 2021 towards this important program. And again, I'm delighted to see the work of SSC in accessibility and disability inclusion. So well done to the team. This being National Accessibility Week, Are there specific challenges when we talk about cybersecurity and disability inclusion? So in other words, how do we make cybersecurity accessible? And I guess this would be a question to either Mr. Perron or Mr. Davies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. It's an interesting question in the sense that while we are very focused on security and cybersecurity, we need to make sure that our employees and Canadians have access to the service and the system that we are putting in place. So accessibility is always, besides security, one of the preoccupation. So at Shared Service Canada, we have a team which is called the Accessibility Accommodation Adaptive Computer Technology Program Team that review and advise department on application solution to really make sure that when something is launched, whether it's an application or a new process, it's accessible by default. And making sure that what have been in place for a while is also reviewed and adjusted so it follow the standards for accessibility. So we have that capacity and it's very important. And the link with security here is when we implement new measures, we have to make sure we test them from an accessibility perspective so it doesn't become a barrier for those who legitimately need to access these applications and these systems to do their work or access their services. So it's critical that we maintain that attention. We also have, as part of this program, two other aspects. One is about supporting the employees so they receive an assessment of what might be needed for them to be able to fully operate in the workplace. So making sure that we have equality there. So they are providing advice. And we have added last year a dimension to that, which was missing, which is new employees coming in or temporary employees also benefit from what we call the landing library. So to make sure that early on in their employment in the federal government, as an employer of choice, we provided them with the tools, the adaptation in terms of technology, monitor, device, application that can help them to do and fully participate into the workplace. So this program is essential. So thank you for mentioning that. It's very important, particularly this week.
No, and exactly, and I appreciate introduce cybersecurity measures. We're always putting an accessibility lens on those measures themselves, so that they don't add additional barriers to our federal employees. According to the Digital Operations Strategic Plan, the federal government is on track to launch the OGGO program, which will allow individuals and businesses to use a single identity and password to access federal government services through a single window on canada.ca. So we're talking about making things easier as well for people. What is the status of the work of the OGGO platform, and what are some of the challenges of delivering on that vision?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the principle behind the OGGO is that we don't want Canadians to have to try to understand and decode all of the government bureaucracy machinery behind it, and really have a single window for all services to Canadians, and that's canada.ca. And to enable that to the next level, to be able to take it to a service-oriented environment, the foundation of that is digital identity. So we want to be able to allow Canadians to use the trusted identity of their choice to be able to access services on canada.ca and to be able to move between those services seamlessly. So we've recently launched a pilot project with ESDC, which is called the Benefit Delivery Modernization Program, to enable what is called Sign in Canada. And this is going to be used specifically to access those benefits that ESDC delivers in a way that is seamless to Canadians. So they'll be able to log in once and access multiple services. We're doing that with an enterprise lens so that once that work is completed, it will be reusable by other departments and agencies, so that ultimately and eventually all GC services will be available through a single identity capability. That's what we call the OGGO. Thank you.
Are there additional risks or challenges that this sort of simplification or streamlining represents in terms of cybersecurity?
So if under the current model, if you had all services accessible under a single credential and that credential was compromised, there would obviously be an increased risk. What we're doing to address that is make sure that this is bound not just to a credential, but through a true digital identity, something that is verifiable and highly secure. For example, you would need to be able to provide access to your provincial identity plus maybe a password or some other form of identification. Multiple actions are required to gain access to it. We call that multi-factor authentication, and that's how the service will be more secure.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmierczuk. We will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I think that my question will be for Mr. Jones or Mr. Brouillard. You can share the work. Last week, Mr. Brouillard and I, we talked about our outdated systems, and we did so jokingly. But joking aside, what are the main risks linked to the fact that our systems are old? The Auditor General said that we are at a tipping point. What could be the consequences for Canadians, and are we at that tipping point? And where do the threats come from? From the country or from abroad? And if so, where abroad? I'll start, Mr. Chair. I'd like to explain the difference between what we call the risk linked to the technical debt or legacy systems, which means that the older systems are, the more expensive it is to maintain them. It's as if we were not changing the oil in a car for 5 years. At some point, you'd have to change the engine. But there are risks that are increasing, and I'll let Mr. Jones explain what it actually means. But those systems are aging, and then when they become old, they're exposed for a longer time to cyber attackers. So I'd like Mr. Jones to explain that kind of risk.
Thank you for that. I think there's a couple things I would just add. The first one being that if the system is connected to the internet, it has to be kept up to date, and that's where our legacy environment just isn't connected in that same way. And so this is where a modern environment does change the threat. But that being said, in general, where we're looking at threats coming from is it actually doesn't matter as a cyber defender. We look at what the malicious activity could look like no matter where it comes from, because we don't differentiate that. And then if there is a threat, then it's dealt with by the proper authorities who investigate those types of activities. So in most cases, it would be the RCMP if it was a criminal nature type of thing. But when we're looking at the IT environment, there are a few things that we've said, and they're in our top 10. One of the biggest ones is maintaining systems up to date, keeping them up to date, and ensuring that they're continuously improved. And that's one of the areas where we need to be working on the next generation of technology with security built in from the start. Security is not something you kind of bolt around systems. It's built in throughout the process. And so when Mark was talking about the digital identity process, security has been thought of from the start before a single piece of code was written or a single application was purchased. That's what we need to be doing going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you, Ms. Vignola. We'll now go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. On May 25th, 2020, Mr. Glover told the committee that in the first 10 weeks of the pandemic, there had been no incidents involving data breach. However, during the same period, there have been incident blocks every day, but none of consequence. So how have the situation evolved since May of last year? Have there been any incidents involving data breaches through you to the CIO? Mr. Brouillard, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. To my knowledge, there have been no significant data breaches related to cyber activity since the pandemic started. There was the credential stuffing incident from last summer, which, as Mr. Jones talked about, isn't a breach of our systems. It's people accessing the system with fraudulent credentials. So it really becomes fraud, not cybersecurity. Some of the other incidents we've talked about today, SolarWinds, the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability, some third-party vulnerabilities as well, have been addressed. They were remediated, but there was no significant breach of data.
Have there been any incidents concerning blocks of consequence? If so, how many and when?
I'm sorry, please define blocks.
Well, the incident, Mr. Glover was quoted as saying that there had been incident blocks every day, but none of consequence. So is it like, I think I know what it means, but I don't want to.
Yeah, so that would be in the technical aspects. Maybe Mr. Perron or Mr. Jones would like to.
So like a denial of service type deal?
Yeah, maybe.
That they stop, yes.
Yeah, maybe I can add in the first, I would say 10 weeks of the pandemic, there was actually difficulty for the system to accommodate remote access, and there was not enough connection. But when end of May and June came last year, the capacity ramped up in terms of secure remote access. So these blocks have stopped. And now, and you may have noticed at the time where Mr. Glover was talking, we were also talking about the situation where we were asking employees to use the system only a certain time of the day. We went over this during the summer by increasing the capacity of secure remote access. And I will insist on the word secure remote access. The idea is not to give access, it's to give secure remote access. So allowing our employees to work from home and not increasing the risk for the network and the government activities. So now we are able to provide 290,000 simultaneous connection, and we have answered all the demands from the department in terms of increasing capacity. So these situations that were visible in the first few weeks of the pandemic, with hard work and collaboration between the parties, we were able to put in place solutions that have allowed hundreds of thousands of federal employees to do their work from home.
Thank you, Mr. Perron, and thank you, Mr. Green. We will now go to Ms. Harder for 5 minutes.
Mr. Perron, my question is for you. Shared Services is responsible for all IT-related procurement. So we're talking emails, telephone, computer data centers for the entire government of Canada. Given your role, can you tell this committee whether or not there is a prohibition on securing Huawei technology for any department within the Government of Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question from the Member of Parliament. There is a process that is called the supply chain integrity process that is managed by the Canadian Security Establishment, which SSC will refer procurement activities with suppliers or new products to CSC for a review and advice to look at the security aspect, because it's not only the product or the service, but it's how the service is constructed and delivered that needs to be reviewed before we make a decision. And on this, would maybe, if you agree, Mr. Chair, we'll turn to Mr. Johns to explain what is being performed in terms of assessment.
I'll just interject for 1 second here. I'm not looking for an overall summary of the evaluation process. I'm just actually looking for quite a simple answer here, and that is Huawei technology prohibited from being secured by the Government of Canada for any of its services?
Okay, I will try to be a bit more clear. We don't have any Huawei technology operating on our network at this time. And if there was any provider that would be coming with that technology, it will be part of the package that will be reviewed through the supply integrity chain. And CSC will provide us advice. But at this point, we haven't procured. We are not using Huawei technology on the Government of Canada network.
Okay, so I can appreciate that you're not doing that at this time, but is there a policy in place in order to protect us from any future procurement of Huawei technology?
The policy is about when we are acquiring services or technology, we go through the supply integrity chain process and we ask advice from CSC before doing or taking action in this area. So there is a built-in process to assess the integrity of the supply chain and making sure we are making the best decision to support the government operation and the service to Canadian. And this is called the supply chain integrity.
What I'm hearing from you is that Shared Services Canada would be open to the possibility of securing Huawei technology. Is that correct?
What I'm saying is that each time we are procuring new products, new device, we are going to the supply chain integrity that have been put in place to assess each and every transaction.
Okay, and that supply chain that you're talking about, that integrity, there's nothing in there that would preclude Huawei technology from being set up here in Canada.
Mr. Chair, to answer the question of the Member of Parliament here, this process is managed by the CSC So in terms of describing what are the steps and how this is proceeding, I think Mr. Jones is better equipped than myself to explain that.
I will allow Mr. Jones to comment on the question.
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So supply chain integrity checks. We check a number of things, the type of equipment, vulnerability, foreign ownership control influence, many other aspects. And then we come up with a risk rating. And if the risk rating is too high, the department, in this case, Shared Services Canada, would make the decision whether or not to accept or reject and look for another type of product. To date, because we do this on a product by product basis, we always look from the start, so that we are always following the rules of things like trade agreements, et cetera, and providing the best advice to shared services. But the goal for us there is to make sure that we're giving a complete and comprehensive assessment of the supply chain risk.
Thank you.
So that departments can make their decisions.
Okay. So to my specific question then, with regards to Huawei, we have concrete evidence of Chinese espionage, infiltration, systematic interference in Canadian companies and with the federal government. That seems like a pretty high risk in terms of doing that risk assessment that you're talking about, which includes foreign ownership and then, of course, the risk that this type of technology would pose to Canadians and the government. So is Huawei being discussed? I mean, the Five Eyes Alliance has all banned Huawei technology or come up with very significant protocols in terms of its use. Is Canada going in that direction? Are you giving that any consideration? Is that going to be a part of the policy going forward?
Mr. Chair, as Ms. Chaperon has said, the Government of Canada does not have any Huawei technology operating on our networks. And we put our equipment purchasing through any equipment purchased through our supply chain integrity process.
Yeah. Sorry, that didn't answer my question. Is there a process being put in place to protect Canadians and the government, sensitive information that is held within our data systems? Is there any initiative being put in place to make sure that Huawei technology is not used in future endeavors?
The supply chain integrity process, Mr. Chair, is there to ensure that all decisions made are made to ensure the safety and security of Canadian information and Canadian networks and Government of Canada networks, in this case with Shared Services Canada.
Thank you, Ms. Harder, and thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses who are before committee. I actually want to just jump back on the supply chain integrity, and perhaps I can ask Mr. Perron, how long has this supply chain integrity been in place?
You're asking me an historical question, and I was not in Shared Service Canada for so long, so I won't be able to answer and give you a date. I think Mr. Jones can probably give us the date when this was created, or Mr. Brewer.
Unless Scott knows the exact date, we'd have to get back to you on the specifics. I've certainly been aware of it for many years. I've been here since 2016, but I couldn't specify an exact date.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
So in terms of the formal program, it goes back to the initial stand-up of Shared Services Canada, but there was a supply chain integrity advice given well before that, in the years leading up to it and before my involvement in cybersecurity, which has been about 14 or 15 years. So,
okay.
But the formal program really started with Shared Services Canada and the fact that there was one central place to work with in the procurement and work on these big projects.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. A company, and it doesn't matter whether it's Huawei or whomever it is, may be able to participate in a procurement, but as soon as it goes through the supply chain integrity, it may come back and say, sorry, but your security just won't pass, so you can't participate. Is that the goal here?
Exactly, and it's also to make sure that we don't only look at the surface, but the process look deep, So what is behind? What is behind in terms of technology? Sometimes we buy services, and these service provider will have their own technology, their own infrastructure, and this has to be transparent. This information is supplied by the bidders through the process to SSC, and this information is provided to CSC to perform the assessment. And we are relying on the advice to make final decision on the procurement.
Right. So a Canadian company could appear at the forefront to be secure and whatnot, but their own suppliers may be compromised or may use technologies that is compromised, and that's the point of the supply chain integrity.
It's the assurance.
Process.
It's the assurance that SSC is looking for through that process to make sure that those with the expertise and the knowledge will go through the process and perform that kind of assessment that our technical team may not have the expertise to do. So we are lucky in Canada. We have this center with specialized resources that focus their 100% of their energy on these questions, and it's providing us the assurance that we are making the best choice from a security perspective.
Okay, great, thank you. Now to switch gears, the recent some Canadians obviously felt the impact of their government accounts closed with CRA. Can someone explain to me what happened there and why the government took the precautions to shut down these accounts, and what is the best way for Canadians to prevent that from happening?
So I can answer the first part of that question, Mr. Chair. CRA has been proactively using different methods and third parties to look for signals that accounts have been identified and potentially compromised. So this is anything from, again, going back to the capabilities where there's been previous compromises or of known lists of identities that are suspicious. And so all they do is they deactivate the account, they contact the user, and they tell them, you may have been compromised, and this may have been part of some other event, which may affect other accounts like your bank accounts or your Facebook accounts and things like that. So it is giving Canadians a proactive piece of advice that they need to look at their cyber hygiene, and then they need to take action. In the CRA account, there's a process for them to reestablish their accounts. They don't lose their accounts permanently. It's just that they have to reset their passwords, reestablish their identity. But I would leave it to Mr. Jones to talk about what other cyber hygiene activities Canadians should take to protect themselves overall when this happens, or even as part of just due course.
So, Mr. Chair, just quickly to add into what Canadians can do. First thing is, don't reuse passwords on accounts you really care about. In fact, don't reuse passwords. So we recommend Canadians use things like password managers, something that will auto-generate some random, complicated string of passwords. For things that you really care about, though, unique passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication. And so that means ask it to send you a text message when you're logging in, or you log in from a trusted device, or you have one of those hard tokens, but most people won't use those. Those are kind of hard to use. But turn on something so that they verify. Security questions are not multi-factor, though that information has been stolen, so don't count on that as a second factor. So something when we talk about that, so something your password, something you are, so, in the physical world, your fingerprint, your picture, something like that. And something you have. And so that's where we talk about, you get a text message on your phone giving you a code to log into within the next few minutes, et cetera. So that's multi-factor. But turning on those things already makes you a much harder target. Those are simple things you can do. And I encourage every Canadian to go in and change the passwords for the things you care about, the things that can have harm to you as a citizen. Set it to a hard password, or better yet, a passphrase if it's allowed, something that only only you can remember. And if you're going to write it down, lock it away somewhere and hide it. Don't tape it under your keyboard. That's the first place anybody looks.
Great. Thank you. And
thank you, Mr.
Is this it, Mr. Chair? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much. And I'll remember that, not to put it under my keyboard anymore. Appreciate that. So as I look at the time, and I realize that we've heard some great questions and answers, and I look at the time, recognizing that we have to go in camera And we're basically, if we go into the next round, it would take us well past that point. So with that said, I think I would like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. All five of you, although Mr. Jones and Mr. Perron and Mr. Brouillard did all the answering, and I appreciate that. And you did indicate that you might have to look up some further questions and respond to us. So we do appreciate if you would do that and respond to the clerk with those answers. It would be greatly appreciated. And so with that said, we thank the witnesses for being here today. As we go now from the public portion of this committee to the in-camera portion of the meeting, when I suspend the meeting, the technical staff will end this part of the meeting in Zoom. This means that the members cannot remain logged into this meeting. You will have to go out and then come back in and using the passcode that the clerk has sent to you. And so with that said, I will suspend the meeting till we back together in a couple minutes.